Hi guys, this is David Williams from Volumes of Fun, and in this video I'm just going to give a quick overview of our Cubiquity for Unity3D project, to which we've just released the source code on Bitbucket. I'm going to assume that you've already downloaded the source code, either from Bitbucket or from a zip archive, and that you've extracted it somewhere on your computer. So from that point, we'll basically start by opening the folder which you have with the source code in it. In my case, it's in C drive, code Cubiquity for Unity3D. Now, when you open this project for the first time, you'll see that there are three folders inside of assets. Cubiquity is the main folder. That contains all the C# scripts and the shader code for integrating with the Cubiquity Voxel engine. Editor controls the scripts for things like the volume creation wizards, which you'll see later, as well as for being able to interact with the volume in Unity edit mode. And streaming assets is basically where we'll be saving our volumes to later. Now, you can just start with an empty scene, but for convenience, I've created in this examples folder a scene called example, which basically the main camera has a script attached to it to let you move around. There's a directional light, and also there's a skybox present, as you can see if we hit play. So we'll just use this instead of a completely empty scene. Now, to create our first volume, we go up to Game Object, Create Other, Coloured Cubes Volume, and we have several options to choose from. I'll show them all, but let's start with an empty volume. Now, when you choose to create an empty volume, you'll see this dialog box, which you might need to resize the first time, but hopefully it works okay. And we can choose here where we want the volume to be saved to. Now, as I mentioned a moment ago, they have to go inside streaming assets, and in particular in this Cubiquity volumes folder. And we have to basically create a new folder inside of that. A Cubiquity volume is not a single file, it's a folder containing a collection of files for the different chunks of the volume. We'll have a look at that later. But for now, let's create a new folder for our empty volume. Let's just call it empty. We can also specify the size of the volume which we're going to create. This version of Cubiquity has an upper limit of 256 in each dimension. An empty volume can be completely empty, but in that case you won't really be able to see anything. So it's quite handy to just give your floor a volume, in this case 8 voxels thick, so that we can actually see it. And if we now hit the Create Volume button, it appears. So this is our new empty volume. If we select it in the hierarchy, scene hierarchy view, then the inspector opens up here. Now, currently this is very basic, but ultimately it's the tools which you will use for constructing a volume. As you can see, it has add cubes, delete cubes, or paint cubes. And let's start with some painting. If we choose a colour here, such as red, then basically we can just click and drag on our volume to paint. Something like this. Okay. If we hit play mode, then we see our volume inside our scene with our skybox. We can fly around it, etc. And the data which we just wrote into it. Back to edit mode, and we can try, for example, the add cubes option. Let's try blue this time. And you can freely draw around on the floor. I'm just drawing any old random shapes here just to show it off. You can see it's quite fast. The cubes are sticking up. You can build like a really high structure if you want. And of course in the future we'll build tools for drawing lines or for filling regions, whatever. But all of that will essentially be built on top of this draw pixel or draw voxel functionality. So really we're just getting the building blocks in place for this early version. And again, we can also choose delete cubes, and for example, we can then create a hole in our floor, or delete whichever voxels we like, really. And again, we switch to play mode, and it's all there, which we just created. Now, when creating this empty volume, we selected a folder called empty inside streaming assets. So let me just show you how that looks now. If we open up Explorer and we go into the appropriate folder, assets, streaming assets, Cubiquity, volumes, this is the one we created, empty. And you can see it has a whole bunch of files, each representing a single chunk. At the moment, the chunks are 64 voxels squared, and the file name indicates the lower and upper bound of each particular chunk. They're quite small. The volume is mostly empty, so they compress down quite nicely. Just a 20 odd kilobytes in this case. But as volumes get more complex, then the size of the data can increase, of course. Okay, back to Unity now, and let's delete that volume and create a new one. The next volume we're going to create, we'll do so by importing from some image slices. Okay, now in Cubiquity examples, we have a folder called volume data, Voxelians level 3. And this folder basically contains a series of PNG images representing slices through a virtual terrain. So we're going to import these slices as a volume. To do this, we go to Game Object, Create Other, as before, Coloured Cubes Volume, and this time Create Coloured Cubes Volume from Images. Again, we give it a folder where it will save the data because it will import from the image slices, but it's going to then save the resulting volume somewhere else. Let's create a folder called Imported. And then tell it where to find the image data. So that was Assets, Cubiquity, Examples, Volume Data, Voxelians level 3. We hit create volume and it's there straight away. As you can see, this one's slightly smaller than the volume from last time, but it's also showing off quite nicely the shadows, which we get for free in Unity 4.2. And again, we can switch to play mode to see it. We can make it a bit more interesting this time by adding some interaction with the terrain. Again, in the examples folder, there is a script called click to destroy. Now if we drag this onto our voxel terrain, then, well, you can see it showing up here. It basically lets us click on the terrain to create small explosions. So if we now press play, we can see this in action. For example, I can click here, or here, and we can destroy pieces of the terrain. Now I won't show you the source code, but it's available in that examples folder, and it illustrates, well, following the mouse position, performing a raycast to determine what you clicked on in the volume, and also it shows you how to delete voxels from the volume and how to spawn cubes in their place to create this nice kind of destruction effect. But this behaviour is not actually part of Cubiquity. It's simply an example using Cubiquity. And obviously, how you want your explosions to look or what you want to happen on mouse interaction, well, that's completely up to you. And you can code your own scripts starting from that example. Again, if we go back to our Explorer, we can see now the imported folder here. And again, these are our chunks. This represents real data, so you can see they've got slightly bigger files compared to the empty volume. And that whole volume, which you were just looking at, is taking up about 20 kilobytes on disk. The compression isn't the final version. It may improve in the future, but it's pretty good for now. Okay, the last thing I want to show is procedural generation. So I'll delete that voxel terrain now and create a new one from game object, as before, create other, colored cubes volume, and here we have create colored cubes volume procedurally. You see the pattern. We need to tell it where to save the data, so let's create a folder called proc for procedural. The default size is fine. We hit create volume, and this is the volume that it generates. Now I must emphasize at this point that as with the click to destroy script, this procedural generation script is just an example. So if you don't like the way this procedural terrain looks, then you can just use it as an example. You can look at it to see how we write voxel values into the volume, how we write colors, how we're making use of the built-in Perlin noise function, or you could also use an external library for noise generation, and you can basically implement your own terrain generation. So please do just see this as an example, and then customize it to your needs. Again, we can take the click to destroy script, we can drag it onto that voxel terrain, and when we hit play, well, we see it again. And as before, we can click to destroy pieces of the terrain. We can dig right down through the ground, if we like, something like that. Destroy chunks of the mountain. Probably even make a tunnel through the mountain if we wanted. There we go, nice tunnel through the mountain. Okay, and that's basically what I wanted to show you. So at the moment, 3 ways. Oh, one other thing, you'll notice that when I leave play mode, that the damage which we applied in play mode has been restored. It's been fixed, which is what you expect from Unity, that any changes you make in play mode are not persistent. It returns to how it was before. Okay, as I was saying, that's what I wanted to show you. 3 ways of creating volumes, all in their early stages at the moment. You can create an empty volume and draw into it. You can import a volume from image slices, and in the future we'll have tools available for converting other formats into those image slices. Or you can use procedural generation like we've done here. The actual API of Cubiquity is very simple. It's just you create a volume and you set the colour of the various voxels. So everything else with the click to destroy or the procedural generation, that's all just examples, and you should be able to come up with some interesting alternatives of your own. So download it, give it a try. If you have any questions, then come by our forums and ask. Or also post any interesting screenshots if you manage to make anything nice. And watch out for future news and the next video. Okay, thank you.